We made this.
Hello everyone and welcome to Pick a Disc. I'm your host Matt Latham and this is the podcast where someone picks a disc to talk about for whatever reason they want to. And as it's a multiple of 10, it's episode 90, it's a Matt pick. So I'm here to be spoken to by Colin from We Dig Music yet again. And I've selected the Yellowjackets playlist from season 1. We've both selected a few different tracks to talk about. Now, just to give you some kind of heads up, this is going to be put onto 2 different feeds. So this is going to be on the Pick a Disc feed, and also just for me to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, this is also going to go on the No Book Club feed as well, which is the Yellowjackets podcast I co-host with Tony and Kurt. So so basically I'm just doing half the work for 2 episodes of content, which I think's frankly a great idea, and I wish I thought of doing that sooner. What this means is generally, me and Colin had spoke before we start recording, we are not going to actively spoil any major plot things that will ruin your enjoyment of Yellowjackets. So if you've not watched the TV show Yellowjackets or have no idea what we're talking about, have a look. It's really, really good. That's why I've formed another podcast about it, so my opinion might be slightly biased. But we actively do not spoil anything major. There's a couple of things we talk about, but nothing that will ruin your enjoyment of it. We do get to the final song on the the penultimate song on the playlist, and there is a point where we talk about editing out spoilers, and what's ended up happening is I've ended up cutting out pretty much the whole of the chat for that final song because we do get quite spoilery. So you should be safe to listen to this without really having anything spoiled for you. So yeah, I'm actually talking quite long for this actually, but I'm gonna wrap this up pretty soon because I want to get to the chat, and this is our longest episode. But yeah, so if you're listening to both on the Pick a Disc and the No Book Club chat, No Book Club, you're going to get about 4 or 5 minutes extra while we talk about Enya's song, because it just gets really spoilery. If you're listening on Pick a Disc, that section is cut out. So yeah, so don't moan at us if we accidentally spoil it, because I'm pretty sure we don't drop any major spoilers in the Pick a Disc feed at all. So yeah, if you like what you're hearing, follow us on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter under Pick a Disc, blah 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 blah. If you're listening on No Book Club, if you're listening to this and thinking, oh, I wouldn't mind watching Yellowjackets, watch Yellowjackets first, because we do drop spoilers from the first episode of No Book Club. If you wanna watch Yellowjackets, watch that, and then listen to No Book Club later on. You can find us on No Book Club or Yellowjacket Pod on Twitter. If you just look for No Book Club, the podcast, you'll find us somewhere. So yeah, I am muttering by myself for far too long than I usually do for this. So yeah, there's a lot of caveats. But episode 90 is done, which means that we're going up towards that mythological episode 100, which was the first album that I wrote on the spreadsheet as when I first started doing this podcast. So yeah, we're gearing up to quite a milestone for me. But let's get through episode 90 first and talk to Colin about Yellowjackets Season 1's soundtrack.
Hello, welcome to Pick a Disc. I'm not Matt, because it's a Matt pick.
Yes,
because it's episode 90.
90.
So, I'm Colin, from We Dig Music through this month's issue, and Shipwrecked and Comatose, and also various previous episodes of Pick a Disc, so you've probably heard me before. But yeah, Matt gets to choose this one. Matt, what disc have you picked?
Well, I'm just going to make just people who just listen to this and suddenly realise that, hang on, this isn't No Book Club. I'm going to fill people
too.
in. Yes. Yes, Colin is hosting 2 podcasts at once. You're like multitasking. And because this is going to be on the Now Book Club feed. I'm going to be talking about the first season, or a selection of songs from the first season playlist of the Showtime TV series Yellowjackets.
Yes, which isn't a disc.
It's not, no, but...
But we've sort of selected a selection of them which would fit on a disc should you choose to burn it onto a CD. So, loopholes and all that.
Yes, it's like, yes, I mean, you can use, we're using the same logic as we did for that Christmas episode that we did all the way back in 2019. So,
absolutely.
But yes, the Yellowjackets Season 1 playlist / not a disc is what I'm picking for the 9th Matt pick. So
yeah, Yellowjackets. Do you want to maybe tell the Pick a Disc listeners what the bloody hell Yellowjackets is? Because probably some of them haven't watched it. They should, because it's brilliant.
It is, and anyone who's follows Pick a Disc on Instagram and Twitter might be talking about my side gig, or my side gig, or my side chick, as I almost referred to it as once, but I thought, you know what, I better not. Yes, Yellowjackets is a kind of drama / thriller, not really horror, TV series that follows...
It's a supernatural horror, isn't it, Matt? Supernatural, isn't it?
Well, I wouldn't say that, but I mean, actually, while we're on here, I'm going to use the question I'm going to give to when I'm hosting Now Book Club and ask you, where do you land on the supernatural / real? Are you a me, which is basically everything can be explained through psychological aspects, or are you a Tony and wrong?
I don't care as long as it's going to be brilliant, but I think I would prefer it to not be supernatural, because I think it'll be more interesting if it's not. You can hand wave so many things away if it's ghosts did it, or the spirit of the woods, or something like that. It's a lot more intriguing and interesting if it's emotional damage.
Yeah,
say what the kids say on TikTok.
Yes, emotional damage, and the emotion for any Pick a Disc listeners who are still confused. The emotional damage being done is to a bunch of teenage soccer players who, in 1996, they are on a private plane going over the Canadian wilderness, and they crash into this forest, and basically they were there for 19 months, and it flips, and it kind of then jumps to the present day in 2021. No, 2021. In 2021,
it's not that far in the future.
Yeah, in 2021, where some of the survivors are now in their early 40s and kind of dealing with kind of like the PTSD and emotional trauma over 25 years later,
and other shenanigans. It's not just PTSD. There's shit going down.
Yes, and this isn't going to be a spoiler because it's very heavily implied in the pilot, and it's been kind of mentioned in the promotional materials, but it's very much implied that they did resort to cannibalism, and that's something that's very heavily kind of suggested by the end of the first episode, and it's not really a spoiler. They've been using it as a selling piece, and there are kind of people who are debating whether the cannibalism actually happened or not, but I think the showrunners have said, no, I thought it was quite explicit in that they had.
It's way less boring than Alive, though.
I've not watched that, and part of me thinks that I should.
Alive, obviously, is, for anybody that's not aware, is a true story movie about I think it was it a South American football team, I think so. It might have been a rugby team who crashed in a mountain range at some point in the 70s, I think, and in real life had to eat some of their dead teammates to survive. Yellowjackets, there's a lot more smashing pumpkins and stuff like that in it, so it's better.
Yes.
Also, don't be if you're anything like me and utterly fucking hate sport in any way, and even get put off Harry Potter from Quidditch. Don't be put off about the fact that it's a girls' football team that is the main characters, because there's not much football in it. So,
and for our American listeners, soccer.
No, football. Fuck off.
But yeah, I didn't realise you cared about enough to.
I don't. I just wanted to annoy some people.
Well, sorry, Colin, you've outed yourself as a die-hard football fan now. I mean,
not in any fucking way.
No, look. Yeah, you can try and deny. I mean,
but the American one's hand egg. It's not a ball. It's like an egg shape, and they use their hands, so it's hand egg, not football. This is the extent of my sporting knowledge.
Okay.
I know there's a superb owl in the American one as well.
Oh, he's very superb.
Yeah, owls are cool.
The owl that is superb. But yes, so the Yellowjackets first season playlist that's on Spotify is about 50 tracks long, but we made a decision to whittle that down.
Yes.
To a choice few.
One of the things I was interested in on my rewatch was I've noted down which songs are diegetic sound and which are non-diegetic. So diegetic is ones where the characters are listening to the songs, and non-diegetic is like background music put in by the producers that they obviously wouldn't hear. And I think there's some really interesting choices because of that.
I learned what that was because of you in the
Bright Eyes episode.
Yeah. She talks about the intro to that, and I was like, that was one of the first instances of, I'm going to learn stuff from this podcast. But
yes,
but yeah, I'd be interested because I've not rewatched any of the episodes since we recorded the end the final of the season, the finale, which the episode name I can never remember the name of. It's the one after Doomcoming. Yeah, this is the penultimate episode. So I've not rewatched it since then, but I listened to the podcast and been watching a couple of videos of the songs on YouTube, particularly the ones that I wasn't too familiar with that you've picked, and one or two that I chose that I still wasn't that familiar with either. But we'll get into that a bit more after.
Yeah, we'll talk about why we chose each one as we go through, I think.
Yeah.
So before we start going through all of the songs that we've picked, we should talk a bit about TV soundtracks, because you've had movie soundtracks on before. Obviously, they're the most successful episodes because they're people trying to listen to the actual Pretty Woman soundtrack on their Alexa devices.
Oh my God! It's about I think it's Pretty Woman, then it's Love Actually, and Pretty Woman is still outnumbering the amount of downloads of Love Actually by about 4-1.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, it's like people saying Alexa, please play the Pretty Woman soundtrack, and it's, all right, how you doing? I'm going to pick this guy.
I think we should put more bits like that in there, so that if people are listening to the podcast near their Alexa, like Alexa, play Napalm Death, that kind of thing. I need to be careful. Luckily, it's not in the same room as me, but it might still start doing it. But yeah, TV soundtracks. It's compiled by Jen Malone and Whitney Pilzer. They're music supervisors who have also they've done the soundtracks for Euphoria, Atlanta, Umbrella Academy, Kevin Can Fuck Himself, Superstore, The Flash. That was all the ones I'd heard of that they'd done. There was others that I hadn't. Their job is to choose loads of awesome songs to go in TV programs. I want their job. That's the best fucking job in the world.
Exactly. Yeah.
I finally, at 40 years old, I have learned what I want to be when I grow up. that kind of quote unquote job and that kind of music supervised thing is perhaps the reason that I kind of discovered my music taste, or my musical renaissance occurred in in my early 20s, because I don't want to get too much into details because it does kind of cross over into what I may be talking about in episode 100, which will be the next Matt pick. Ooh. So I'm not going to get too much into that, but like many years ago, I used to kind of
like write scripts on a script writing community.
Yeah.
Which is where I met this guy called Tony Black.
His birthday today. Not when the episode goes out.
Yeah, it's his 50th birthday. I mean, happy 50th, Tony. Yeah, and like one of the things I remember kind of like doing is like dropping kind of like music cues into the scripts and stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
But it was only like, recently going into like the MySpace and like watching Skins and Skins, and a couple of years later
the music supervision job on Skins and In Between as well, both. I mean, Skins got me into Lanterns on the Lake, which is the band that I then named my daughter after one of their songs. So that's pretty significant, whoever chose that to put it in there, you know.
Yeah, but I quite like the idea that people they're putting all these kind of unknown kind of bands and stuff. And I can't remember much from the Skins soundtrack. The In-Betweeners soundtrack, though, I mean, I remember rewatching the first episode just a couple of years ago, and I'm like, I've forgotten how much, particularly that first half of that first episode, I thought I curated the music, because in the first, like, 10 minutes, you've got Kate Nash, you've got Tellison, and you've got the Wombats, and I'm like, did I curate this? But I quite like the idea that, and I remember, like, the idea of what they was doing with Skins and stuff, and I remember, going on to like MySpace, and I think like, and I remember reading somewhere like saying, because the internet now, you can find unsigned bands and stuff, and I remember I remember kind of curating, and I only have the information for one fictional soundtrack that I've created, and I've got a YouTube playlist for it. Because like a couple of months ago, I'm like, when in the lead up to this, I'm like, I might reference this. So I've actually got a YouTube playlist of about 12 songs of a fictional movie that I was about to write, but never did. But I still have the soundtrack to it. But I was going through kind of like the unsigned column in like the British indie bands thing on MySpace, and one of those bands is a band that I've kind of banned myself from talking about, even though I do bring them up quite often, but I'm not going to mention them.
Las Campesinas.
That's a nasty cough there. Have you taken your COVID test? Have you taken your Los Covidcinos test?
Oh, that's a stretch.
Yeah. I thought that was going to flow better.
You're not allowed to cut that. That's utterly terrible, and you've got to keep that in.
I'm going to keep that in. But that band that I might be talking about in a few episodes' time. In
about 20 weeks.
Possibly, yeah. Be November, you'd be here in about November, and then, God forbid, any other podcast that'll have me on. But during that kind of like period, I was like, I just kind of like the idea of all these kind of curated kind of like soundtracks that would like is like a way for people to discover music, particularly before the internet. And I mean, at the time of listening, I don't know whether my appearance on Soundtrack Your Life would have been aired at this point. It possibly might be, and where I talk about the Buffy the Vampire Slayer soundtrack.
I was about to mention Buffy, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I played that CD to death. And did I really listen to any of the bands on there and post those singles? No, I forgot to.
That means there's at least 2 podcasts coming out over the next few months with different songs by Hepburn being talked about then.
Yes, quite possibly, yes.
There's a Free With This Month's Issue one coming up that's got a Hepburn song on it.
And I keep meaning to listen to that album because I've got a feeling that, particularly me now and my music taste, I'd probably end up liking that. And that's something that I think also has an impact, perhaps, with the Yellowjackets soundtrack, in that there's probably a bunch of tracks on here, particularly some of the ones that you selected, where a few people listening to this would be going, wait, you've never really listened to these artists?
Yeah.
And then they'll go, but Matt, you like these artists. How have you never listened to these?
I have this in some of my notes ready for in a bit.
Yes. And it's basically going to be going, how have you not? You're going to be asking that a couple of times,
I'm going to be compiling you some playlists, I think, by the sound of it.
I mean, like the world's like most ideal job is like curating these kind of soundtracks, and I just find it interesting, particularly when you think about it, because you're not going to have everything on. I mean, you're going to have movie soundtracks where not every single song is on a soundtrack because of rights and stuff, and like the In-Betweeners soundtrack, there's a whole bunch of stuff that they just couldn't get the rights to put on there, but they wouldn't have any room. And this the In-Betweeners soundtrack was 2 CDs anyway.
Yeah.
And they just had loads of stuff they couldn't put on there. But yeah.
I think it's stuff that aired on the show, but they couldn't put it on the album, you mean?
Yeah. And
yeah.
Quick question I was going to ask you as well, because I made a note of this where, for example, Skins and the In-Betweeners that we've talked about a lot, and particularly like for my early 20s, that is my kind of like my Arrested Development in music taste. My music taste developed in my early 20s rather than teen years.
Yeah.
Because my teen years was just basically listening to either Blink-182 or rap music. Indie music kind of kicked in at that point, and I think as people get older and you look back at those as well, they create their own nostalgia, but they're using contemporary music at the time for the most part. And what I find quite interesting with like Yellowjackets or kind of quote unquote period dramas, and this is a period drama. It's just but like you're not the time period you'd associate with that.
Just a bit less Mr. Darcy. There is a Darcy in the soundtrack on this, but she's the bass player in Smashing Pumpkins.
Oh, okay. I did not know that, and I did not know that, and I have listened to your Broken Record podcast about Colin as well. But I think what's quite interesting as well, I mean, particularly with the Yellowjackets, is that more contemporary soundtracks are creating nostalgia for the future, whereas in the present, because you've got this kind of nostalgic thing happening in the 90s, you've already got that pre-built nostalgia, and I'm wondering whether that would have an impact in the choice of songs being done. Now, if that was happening today, then I think there'd be a lot more kind of deep cuts or unsigned bands, and well, particularly with the internet, you can probably find a lot more kind of deep seeded like not that popular stuff and throw it into a TV series and it'll be better. Whereas with this, I think they've picked songs that have either got a cult following already. So if they a cult following already and has that kind of nostalgic attachment to them, and I think, and as much as I love the Yellowjackets, part of me is wondering whether you're not going to get much from like just basically scaring for someone who sounds a bit grungy or someone who sounds like Hole, but then they've only ever had like 1,000 plays on YouTube, like 1,000 plays on Spotify for a track they released in '96, and you throw that onto the soundtrack, it's not going to work as much.
Well, I mean, there's space for a little bit of stuff like that. There are 2 songs in the first episode, not on our list that we're going to talk about, but there were 2 songs that were pretty obscure. There's a track by a band called Door Soul called What If, which is a Shauna and Jackie are getting ready to go to a party kind of thing, and they're listening to this track, and it's a sort of grungy type track. It was only ever had a cassette release in 1994, and then had a digital release, I think, within the last couple of years on Spotify. And then there's a hip hop track called Let Me Find Out by Posneg, which, while it was recorded in the 90s, was never released until 2019.
Okay.
But it's one of these sort of some of the characters, whoever it is that was picking the music at the like keg party in the woods, because it wasn't one of the main characters that was choosing that. It might have been somebody who was really into the underground hip hop scene at the time and had got it through tape trading or something like that. Which is that's my headcanon for, the song did exist, it just hadn't had a commercial release.
Okay. So, but do you think? Yeah. But do you think that probably there's a conscious decision of not having as much of that and perhaps going for the more kind of slightly known? Okay. And I'm glad they did, because the first episode in particular, which is the most music heavy, really, really grabbed me because of the music. It made me go, these characters are slightly older than me. They would have been about 2 years older than me. But so much of this is what I was listening to in 1996. And because of that, there's a massive nostalgia factor for me in there. And, I was watching the first episode with my wife, and I was like, we're a few songs into the episode, and I remember turning to her and going, I think they're using my CD collection.
which happens a lot. I do get that quite a lot with various different things, but not quite to the extent that this particular series has been. There are certain characters in this, because individual characters have different music tastes in this as people would have in real life. And you can tell, if you concentrate and you know the characters, whose songs, each of the songs, even the non-diegetic songs, represent the characters. And there's a through line through the whole thing, with the bits set in 2021 and the bits set in 1996. And you've got, the different characters' vibes fit with the songs, and there are two characters in particular, two or three characters in particular, two major ones and one minor one, who I absolutely would have hung out with. And, they would have been, if they lived in Tamworth, in the Midlands in England, for anybody that's not familiar with that, they would have been hanging out with us at the bandstand near the castle.
Can I make a guess at those three characters?
Yeah, go for it.
Is it Kevin, Natalie, and Shauna?
It is indeed.
Yeah. I think there's a kind of like a nice there's a nice kind of, it doesn't happen that much, but there's a kind of almost, particularly with Jackie and Shauna, where Jackie just doesn't seem to understand and openly kind of like just questions Shauna's music taste.
Yes.
And my God, I've never, and as much as my opinions on Shauna ending up being like a really, really horrible person at times, I sympathise with Shauna. Like the misunderstood kind of weird weird music taste. I've had someone, I'll bring it up in a second when we talk about our first track, but someone go to me saying we're not playing anything like that on the bus drive on the drive to Cardiff when we go camping, because quote unquote my cousin that's with us who's slightly younger will get anxious. I'm like, no, just admit it and just say you don't like my music taste. But
what music that you like would have made them anxious?
The fact that I was really into a Japanese rap
amazing
group called Dragon Ash, which
cool, I can dig that.
Yeah, which they more perhaps had a cult, more known for being the band that who was behind the song that played on the credits of Battle Royale. So if anyone who watched the film Battle Royale, I'm not going to spoil it, but the very final thing, there's the final shot, there's a class photo that shows up at the very, very end, and there's this kind of acoustic rap that starts playing, and it's called Shizuku Nahibi no Kaidan Wo by Dragon Ash, and I absolutely adore that song. So it was that, and also a song called Grateful Days, which features, I think, Aiko and a rapper called Zebra, which sampled the guitar line for a song called Today by the Smashing Pumpkins.
Oh, that's how we're getting into it.
Yes. I'm doing your job for you, Colin, that's it.
Nice work. Well, it's your fucking podcast. So yeah, first song we hear in the entire series is Today by the Smashing Pumpkins, which I absolutely love. Smashing Pumpkins. I think I've mentioned them about 12 times already in this episode. Mm-hmm. There's a little opening sort of montage where it's non-diegetic, and then Jackie and Jeff, two of the main characters, on Jackie's bed, and they're sort of listening to it. My theory about the music tastes of each character, I was quite surprised that was a song that they were listening to, because Jackie does not seem like she's into grunge at all. But there is a diary of hers that we see very briefly later on, and it's got a list of her favourite songs in it, and one of them was 1979. I think it was 1979.
Yes.
By Smashing Pumpkins, which is admittedly one of their much poppier songs. But in my headcanon, I think that either Jeff or Shauna introduced her to Smashing Pumpkins, because the rest of the stuff that she likes is A lot more sort of pop and hip hop sort of stuff like Fugees, Mariah Carey, Alanis Morissette. Outkast is on her list, that's pretty early for Outkast. Although they had a couple of hits on like the hip hop charts in America.
I can never pronounce it. Was Atlians or
Atlians and Aquemini, I think, were both out by around about that point. My knowledge of most of Outkast stuff is like Stankonia and Speakerbox Love Below.
Oh, okay, yeah, that's more or less that. I think there's a couple of songs from those first two I know of, but I think a lot of my kind of is particularly I think Speakerbox and Love Below I think is the I own those albums. I didn't own Stankonia.
Stankonia was where they first had hits over here. Mm-hmm. It was Bombs Over Baghdad was the big one, and then it's the big one, but nowhere near as big in comparison to stuff like Hey Ya later on, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but yeah, obviously this series starting with Today by Smashing Pumpkins was a massive like plus point for me.
Mm-hmm. But again, the only reason I know that song is because of
it being sampled.
It being sampled in a Japanese rap song. And I think I mentioned that in the first episode of the podcast as well when we covered that episode.
I can't believe you hadn't heard it at all before.
My knowledge of the Smashing Pumpkins is very, very limited. I think it's called Zero.
Yeah.
And the only other song that I can probably remember is Tonight.
Yeah.
To the point where I was accidentally trying to find information on this song and realising that I couldn't find anything on Google because I was incorrectly putting in Silver Sun Pickups rather than Smashing Pumpkins.
Silver Sun Pickups very much want to be Smashing Pumpkins, so that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So one of the traditional pick a disc questions, you've not seen them do this live then?
No.
I have. I've seen Smashing Pumpkins 4 times, and 3 of them they've played this. But yeah, this was in 1996. That was when I discovered Smashing Pumpkins. So I didn't have this album until the following January 97. On my 15th birthday, same day I got a Mega Drive. Was when I got Siamese Dream, which was the album before Melancholy and Infinite Sadness, which I'd bought in January 96. So that was that and Pisces Iscariot, their sort of B-sides collection. They were my 1996 soundtrack, pretty much.
Yeah, I'm gonna just do a kind of jump ahead and just reveal that none of the artists in the 18 songs that we're going to briefly go through, I've seen live. So
I've got a few, so I'll mention them when I do.
Okay.
But yeah, next song that appears in the series is Supernova by Liz Phair, which was Shauna listening to it in the car while she's waiting for Jackie. And this is a bit more of a deep cut. What, like you were saying earlier on about them mainly going for big hitters, this isn't so much one. And with it being the second song in it, this kind of showed me that they knew what they were doing with the characters. You know, obviously, when you've got the big group of them all together, they're going to be listening to, some Salt and Pepper and stuff like that, because that was the big pop stuff that all of the team would have known. But when Shauna's sitting in her car on her own, she's listening to Whip Smart by Liz Phair, which this is the second track on. And I have this album. It's good, but I didn't get it until 2003. There was Liz Phair released a self-titled record in 2003 that there was loads of like controversy over her basically selling out, because basically she'd been a sort of grungy alternative rock singer-songwriter for the first 3 records, and then her next album, it was a pop album that she'd co-written with The Matrix. So that was the songwriting team who wrote songs for Avril Lavigne. They wrote like all of her hits off the first album. and
Okay.
Busted, Christina Aguilera, and Ronan Keating.
Which Ronan Keating song?
It's not one I know. I think it was an album track when I looked it up earlier.
If it was Loving Each Day, then if it's Loving Each Day, because that's the only Ronan Keating song I quite like. But
No, I don't think it was that. But yeah, their big one was Avril Lavigne, because they wrote Skater Boy and Complicated and I'm With You.
oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that.
But yeah, so I found Whip Smart in the record and tape exchange in that used to be near Five Ways not near Five Ways, used to be near the Pagoda Island in Birmingham, and it was about £2, so I was like, oh, I'll check this out then, and it's really good, but it's a very front loaded record. All the best songs are right at the start, and I don't think I've ever listened to. Well, no, I have listened to, but I don't think I've very often listened to the whole thing all the way through, because it does tail off a bit.
So yeah, for me, this is one of the reasons I chose it was to kind of like going to push myself into listening to some more Liz Phair, because Liz Phair is someone who I seem to I've listened to perhaps more podcasts about her than actually listening to her music, and I think Exile in Guyville is something that's always been like kind of either suggested, but I've never kind of like sat down and listened to it. And I think a common thing that's going to come from me is that, like, okay, a lot of my music taste now, I think I can see quite a few of the tracks on here is like the precursor to a lot of the stuff that I like, which is pretty much like very kind of almost grungy, very melodic.
There's one coming up soon, definitely, that, yeah, I don't think you will have listened to much of their stuff, but you need to.
But yeah, but again, so yeah, and I really quite liked Supernova. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I need to listen to more Liz Phair. And again, this is one of many artists. I'm like, my artists to listen to folder's getting quite full on Spotify, and it's like giving me anxiety just seeing how many things I need to listen to. Yeah, so yeah, I'm really dreading the end of this because I haven't made any of these ones yet. But yeah, so this is like one of the first. So yeah, so particularly with my kind of relationship with this, and for the majority, quite a bit of the show is it kind of like filling in perhaps the gaps that have happened before. So it's very similar to when I listen to a new trial where I'm like, crap, yeah, this explains a whole lot of my modern day music taste. This is like the first instance of this happening, particularly with this soundtrack.
How old were you in '96? You were about 11.
I was 11 in the October.
Yeah.
So I was in that September of that year I was in year 6.
So I was 14, so that makes sense that I was more, aware of the music than you were, because when you're 11 you're not so much usually knowing what's going on other than stuff that you see on the telly a bit and your parents play you, really, isn't it? So yeah, but then in the scene, Jackie gets in the car and immediately, without permission, just rips the tape out of the tape deck and swaps it for Informer by Snow. Which, I don't mind Informer by Snow, but that's a fucking cardinal sin. If you got in my car and just fucking changed the music, not going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think I said all that I said about Snow on the first episode of when we covered the pilot on our book club, but Didn't you rap half of it? Yeah.
Yeah, I thought you did. Yeah.
Yeah. And
worth subscribing to Pick a Disc listeners, even if you haven't. Yeah. No, watch Yellowjackets first because you don't want spoilers, but then subscribe to No Book Club if you don't already, because you want to hear Matt stumbling his way through Informer.
It's a song that I like and also am annoyed by in the same breath. It's one of those weird. I mean, the album itself is called 12 Inches of Snow. I mean,
which is hilarious.
Yeah, but
not in the way he meant it to be.
Yeah. But I mean, yeah, it's just one of those songs, particularly when you. Do
you reckon that was ever sold in a double pack with Will Smith's Big Willie style?
I doubt it, but they really missed. The opportunity for a double package. So.
Oh fucking hell!
But yeah, it's just one of those. It's one of those songs that I kind of. It's one of those that you think you get sick of listening to it, but you end up. It comes on, and before you realise that you're listening to Informer, the song's finished. And then if you ever look into what the actual song's about and look into the lyrics, it's
about an informer.
It's not what you think it is about after all. I mean, the song's called Informer, and it's about him informing on people. But then people are always
the clues
surprised.
in the title.
Yeah, but it is literally just about him like being picked up by the police and that he trying to get into spill on people, but he won't.
Yeah.
And again, there's he basically describes being cavity searched.
Yes, he does.
And people go, what? No, they don't. And he goes, just open up Genius, read the lyrics, and there's a bit where he pulls up my pants and pull them my pants and look up my bottom. That's an actual line.
It is.
Yeah.
Also, I licky boom boom now is one of the lyrics, not licky bum bum now, which is what me and all my friends at school thought it said at the time. But we were 10.
Everyone did.
As a 10-year-old, that was fucking hilarious.
Yes.
So the next song that we've got on the list to talk about is one that I'm fairly certain you probably haven't listened to the album, but it's influenced nearly everything that you know and love.
Yes.
Miss World by Hole.
I mean, I only watched the music video about at like 7:40 this evening for the first time, and I'm like, oh, this explains the Olivia Rodrigo thing.
Yes. Oh, definitely.
Yeah. But, Hole have always been on the kind of, in the periphery. In fact, the only song I really know of, I probably might know more, but the only one that I know of is Celebrity Skin.
Okay, you need to listen. When we finish recording, you need to listen to Malibu, which is off the same album as Celebrity Skin.
Yeah.
But it's way poppier. It is a absolutely brilliant pop rock song, co-written with Billy Corgan from the Smashing Pumpkins, Homer Simpson smiling politely. But yeah, it's Live Through This was the album that Miss World was from, which was their 1994 record, released, I think it was a week after, it might even have been less than a week after Kurt Cobain killed himself. And yes, Kurt Cobain killed himself. He was not murdered by Courtney Love, you misogynist pricks. Yeah, it's a fucking great record. It's one of my favourite grunge albums of the 90s. Miss World it's either my joint favourite or my second favourite song on the record. Because it's got there's this sort of floaty sort of guitar chord where you, style of playing chords where you've got loads of open strings and you just move in a chord shape up and down the guitar neck, which I always called floaty, and Foo Fighters used it on a song called Floaty, and that's probably why. And I've only just realised that. But Miss World uses that in the verses, and then in the chorus, you stamp on the distortion. It's all power chords, and it's great. But yeah, Jennifer's Body is the other track on that album that I absolutely love. But the whole thing's worth listening to, because all of the sort of rock influenced female fronted bands like Charlie Bliss and people like that are very much, particularly on Guppy, their first record, they're very indebted to Hole. Yeah, I think it's one of those. It's one of those bands that once I start deeping into it, pretty much all the bands that I'm into at the moment, Wolf Alice, Dead Pony, oh god, yeah,
Coach Party, even slightly more poppier stuff. I mean, there's poppy stuff. I mean, I think even Baby Queen is very poppy, poppy. But there's a whole. I mean, there's almost like infamous moment where kind of Courtney Love just like basically just randomly just started listening to her and put a whole kind of like Instagram post talking about her, and like Baby Queen was just like, what? So yeah, Hole has always been on my kind of to listen to list, and I think part of me is probably because part of me is waiting for people, particularly with some acts. I think part of me is waiting I won't listen to it in case someone picks them for the show. But I'm like, you know what? At some point, I've got to think, you know what, sorry, I'm gonna.
There's so many albums that I want to pick at some point. I think I've already been on more than anybody else.
Yeah,
but I'm still planning on being on more.
I think you've got at least 3 or 4 that you've already claimed already. So
Yeah.
yeah. But So that's that's another artist that I'm like, okay, I need to listen to more of.
How about PJ Harvey?
The only song from PJ Harvey that I'm aware of is the duet with Nick Cave.
Okay, yeah. Because the pilot episode of Pick a Disc, of course, was Murder Ballads.
Yes, yeah.
Which is a fine album. Down by the Water was... so this was a track on To Bring You My Love, which is an absolutely fucking phenomenal record. This is in a section where there's a basically bit of a psychedelic hallucinogenic trip going on, and it fits quite well, I think. Even though I'd never describe it as a psychedelic song, but it works really well with the sort of the sound of it, if that makes any sense. This was the first PJ Harvey song I ever heard. It was on a free cassette with Vox magazine, class of '95.
So it was free with that month's issue.
It was. Hopefully somebody will pick that for a free with this month's issue episode at some point, or I'll pick it for them. And yeah, the like fuzzed up bass synth on it sounds amazing, and then you've just got the really sort of trebly percussion over the top of it. I've seen PJ Harvey live 3 or 4 times, but never seen her play this song. Annoyingly, the first time I saw her live was at Leeds Festival in 2001, and the day before at Reading Festival she played it, but it wasn't in the set list at Leeds.
That's a shame. I've not listened to much PJ Harvey, but PJ Harvey I think is also he's one of these artists, and again there's probably, and one of the things that will put me off particularly trying to listen to older artists is like if they've got like a kind of varied and perhaps like a multitude of albums. I always find that is very, very kind of hard to
sort of daunting where there's a big back catalogue.
Yeah, and
like The Fall.
I think I'm due to play in The Fall at some point. I think everyone there's a running, I can't remember which Twitter account it is. There's a running joke that pretty much everyone will play in The Fall for 15 minutes.
If Marquis Smith hadn't have died, we'd all have a chance, definitely.
It's like jury service. I think more people have been in The Fall than the jury service.
Well, there was a famous, and I've done that now. There was a famous quote by Marquis Smith that it was. If it's me and your granny on bongos, then it's The Fall. So sadly, your granny on bongos is the only one left now because Marquis Smith died a few years ago.
But I think PJ Harvey is another one where I think there's probably, from my understanding is that she's actually got she has quite a wide scope of sound as well. So I got a feeling that perhaps some albums I might not.
Yes.
Might get into and others. So again, I think that might be just either yourself or your co-host Tracy from We Dig Music, who often just refers to as Polly, which you and Ian seem to just take the piss out of all the time.
It's like she knows her.
Yeah, might guide me into the parts of PJ Harvey that I might quite like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Tracy will tell you to listen to White Chalk, but don't. It's a good record, but it's depressing as fuck. Which sort of brings us on to sort of similar kind of attitude to some of PJ Harvey's stuff is Peaches featuring Iggy Pop and Kick It, which is this is the first song we're talking about that isn't from the 90s. Because this is one of the present day bits. And it's a track called Kick It, which was on Peach's album Fatherfucker, which is a fucking great record.
When was that released? You know,
it was 2003.
2003, right? Because one of my favorite bands, and to this day is perhaps one of or might potentially be my all-time favourite gig, is a band called Fight Like Apes, who are an Irish band, and they've got kind of like they're more pop rock. It's not really grungy, but they've got a very kind of unashamed pop aspect. But they are kind of very kind of aggressive, shouty. There's a song called Digifucker, and this reminded me so much of kind of like a less synthy Fight Like Apes. I bloody love this.
Well, there is a lot of synth in Peach's stuff as well, so some of her other stuff might be more like it, but with less Iggy Pop.
I love this. It's kind of shouty and energetic, but not heavy. So, look, particularly with like kind of rock or kind of heavier rock, that shouty lyrics can sometimes get combined with like, if not loud but heavy. So it's particularly like the more metal you get, that's when you perhaps start to lose me a bit. But I quite like just how simple the music is in the places, and just how energetic and shouty they both are. And plus there's tag team vocals. I love tag team vocals. I was a bit dismayed to find out that it was Iggy Pop guest starring, and Peaches isn't actually two people. But but you can't be dismayed that it's Iggy Pop, because it's Iggy fucking Pop, who should be president of the universe as far as I'm concerned. He'd do a fucking terrible job and we'd all die, but it'd be very, very entertaining. I also, every single year, say that he should win Eurovision, but he's never entered yet, which is obviously a hindrance against that. But yeah, this is one of the things that I think they did really well. Another thing they did really well with the soundtrack to this is showing what the characters' music taste evolved into later on. And as I was saying earlier, and you guessed correctly, that the ones that are closest to my music taste is particularly Natalie and Kevin. It shows that there's a couple of songs from what they were listening to later on, and this is the one that Natalie listened to. And every single mix CD that I made around 2003 had this song on it. I put it on every now and again. I'll find an old unmarked CD and I'll just put it on in the car, and this will be on like second or third track. You know, I found like 2 or 3 CDs in a row before, and like I must have made these within the same month, but I still put this track on more than one of them because it's fucking great. And Iggy also sort of repeated this kind of thing later on with there's a Kesha track on Warrior, her second album, called Dirty Love, where it's basically Kesha and Iggy Pop doing this kind of thing on a Kesha record. So it's a little bit poppier, but it's still great. And it also starts with it's almost like a sort of kids' TV introduction where Kesha's like, "It's Iggy Pop," and then he's just like, "And Kesha," which has always amused me. I'll have to check that out as well. I think Kesha's another one I'll keep wanting to check out. But
I may suggest Warrior as a potential Colin pick at some point because it's an amazing album.
And and before we quickly move on, because I'm just conscious of the time. Before we quickly move on, I'm just going to say that a future map pick will be Fight Like Apes and Mystery of the Golden Medallion, because, and if no one's listened to Fight Like Apes, I love that album, I love that band, I miss them immensely. And
from you saying it sounds like this, I'm checking it out, absolutely.
Oh yeah, if you listen to Digifucker,
okay,
which is a song from that, I love that band so much. I love that, I love that band. Before I start derailing and start talking about Fight Like Apes for now. Yeah, sorry. Yes, Colin, you're in charge. Carry on.
Tangents are good. We like tangents.
Yes.
We also like very long podcasts if you listen to my other ones. I mean, it's you that's got to edit it, so
it's okay. It's not. I've only got 13 days to edit it. It's fine.
So, continuing the songs that are picked by Natalie, Dinosaur Jr. Feel the Pain is the next one we've got on the list.
Yeah, Dinosaur Jr. are a band that I've never really heard of until suddenly everyone that I know and followed have heard. Suddenly, apparently, have heard of the whole time, and it's Yeah, I don't know when this happened, but apparently Dinosaur Jr. was a band like which pretty much turned up in like every single podcast. I'm pretty sure it's like Napalm Death on We Dig Music. I might just be misremembering, but Dinosaur Jr. seems to be mentioned almost like all the time, unless I'm kind of misremembering.
We do mention Dinosaur Jr. a lot. They're one of the bands that me and Tracy absolutely love. Ian quite likes, as long as he doesn't have to hear J Mascis talking, because he talks very, very slowly. But yeah, this was the first Dinosaur Jr. song I ever heard. It came out in 94. I heard it in 1995. The village I used to live in, Polesworth, where I grew up, has a big bank holiday market every bank holiday that snarls up the traffic for fucking miles. But they used to have a couple of little like CD and tape stalls on there, which half of the things they sold on there were bootlegs. And I bought a bootleg copy of the first Shine compilation, which Shine was a series of compilations from 95 through to about 2001, 2002-ish, which were basically, it was mostly Britpop. So you'd get loads of stuff like Cast and Sleeper on all of them. But the first one had a fair bit of sort of late 80s and American indie stuff on there as well. So you got things like The House of Love on there, which I think they got the album title from Shine On, which was on the first tape. But yeah, it had this Dinosaur Jr. track on it, and I remember thinking that this was like one of the most amazing things I'd ever heard, because the lead guitar playing's utterly ridiculous. J Mascis is an amazing guitarist. And I love the way that the song just, when it gets into the sort of, I suppose it's the chorus, but it's kind of an instrumental bit. And he says, feel the pain in the slower bits, but it speeds up loads in the fast bit, obviously. Hence it being called the fast bit. That was articulate. And yeah, it's just fucking great. I really like the bit in the episode where you've got Kevin and Natalie. It's a flashback to, I think, 1994, early 94.
Because they talk about Nirvana, don't they? They talk about Kurt Cobain, but it's definitely before he...
They talk about Kurt Cobain in the present tense. Yeah, so, because they have a conversation where he's basically trying to impress her with his music nerd knowledge, which, that's what I do. And he's talking about the fact that Kurt Cobain wanted J Mascis to join Nirvana at one point. I'd like to think that Kevin has a music podcast in his spare time, but he probably doesn't, because the scene where he meets Natalie and Misty in the present day in the bar, he doesn't mention at any point, just dropping into conversation, that he's got a podcast. And I know from experience that we all fucking do that. So he probably doesn't.
I think it's an unwritten law. I think it's biologically impossible for someone to not mention they do a podcast if they do a podcast. It's one of those things, like for 15 minutes someone would at least attempt to host a podcast, be famous, and be a member of The Fall.
Seems fair.
Or do jury duty.
Yeah. So seeing them live. This band is the reason I am deaf, or one of the reasons. The other one is a band that I used to be in, where we used to deliberately overload our ears. But anyway, that's a different story. I've seen them live a few times. Every time I've seen them has been at a festival. So I've seen them at Glastonbury and Reading, apart from once when I saw them at a club in Derby called the Rock House, which was a really thin room. It was like, it was really narrow is a better word than thin. Thin is a weird word for describing a room. It's a really narrow, long room. And we started off right at the front on the barrier. And then Dinosaur Jr. came out and Jay Maskis was playing his guitar through 3 double Marshall stacks with a Fender combo amp on top. So that is fucking loud. They started playing and it really hurt. So we moved back a bit and then a bit further back. And we ended up going within about 6 songs from the front row to the room at the back of the room where we were just sort of looking through the door. And it was amazing, but my ears have never properly recovered.
Yeah, yeah. I think Band of Skulls in like 2014. That was a gig that I forgot to take my ear defenders because I feel like for at least 10 or 11 years I've got kind of noise cancelling.
Sensible person.
Yeah, I've had the last time I ever forgotten them was in 2014. Band of Skulls.
Yeah,
and I still think that that hum that I hear at late at night.
Yeah.
Right, is either a supernatural being attempting to kill me or the remnants of that Band of Skulls gig.
It's Hob Bobson. That was a deep cut for anybody that listens to Shipwrecked and Comatose. I have seen My Bloody Valentine. I've seen Mogwai. I've seen Swans. I've seen Sun. All of these bands are often described as the loudest bands in the world. None of them are as loud as Dinosaur Jr. The only band I haven't seen that I'd want to... Well, there's 2 bands that I'd want to see to compare it to, but one of them's Man of War, and the other one is Motorhead, so that's not going to happen now, unfortunately. But yeah, you ready to go to the next song?
Yes.
See what I did there?
Yep.
Republica, ready to go.
Yeah. I don't know what public perception is of this song, whether people find it generally annoying, but I like this. I really like Republica. I've always liked this song. When I first got broadband and you discover the ability to obtain large amounts of music through
LimeWire.
No, but past that. That was on I discovered the word torrent at this point.
Right.
There was I can imagine over the course of a week I was kind of off university and discovering whole discographies.
Did Republica have more than one album?
Well, during that week, I got the best of Republica. I think they had 2.
Is that a 1-track single?
No, there's about 19 tracks on it. Hang on, there's about 19 tracks. I think I still have those MP3s in my MP3 library.
Hold on. Yeah, Drop Dead Gorgeous. Yes, I remember that. From Rush Hour with Love, I remember the title but not the song. But then the rest of this, Holly, Fading of the Man, Nothing's Feeling New, Pretty Girl Hate, Kung Fu Movies, Bitch, Don't You Ever, Get Off, Pub Pusher, Bloke, Out of the Darkness, Picture Me. Then there's Ready to Go original mix. So Ready to Go's on there twice. So that could have been a 3-track single, couldn't it?
Yeah, but some of those songs are great, and but then the MP3s are no longer on my machine, on my PC MP3 library, which is slightly annoying. But yeah,
that's right, you could buy the CD.
Yeah, I think I might do
if you wanted to.
Yeah, it's probably £1 somewhere, but I remember getting that in the same week that I got the complete discography of Chumbawamba. Bare Naked Ladies.
Were you expecting the complete discography of Chumbawamba to be weird crust punk for a lot of it?
I wasn't expecting it to be about 20 albums long.
Yeah.
This was in the mid noughties as well.
It was towards the end of their career when they had a hit.
Yeah, and to this day, I remember going through and keeping the songs that I quite like from them, and I don't know how many songs they got, but I kept 2.
So another one that could have been a single.
Which was like
Republica. This is arguably a good song, but I fucking hate it.
It's one of these overplayed songs, which, you know what, I like it, but I fully understand why people might dislike it. It's one of these songs that will occasionally you'll suddenly hear during an ad break for like 100th time.
There's 2 things that mean I don't like it. First one is Saffron's voice. I can't stand her vocals. This isn't the worst thing she ever did. She managed to contribute utterly fucking terrible vocals to Just Say Yes, which is the worst thing in The Cure's discography, which was one of the extra tracks on their 2001 Greatest Hits record. But the other bit that really annoys me is that drum fill, which sounds exactly like the one that Right Said Fred used in I'm Too Sexy, which was from 4 years earlier, so in 1996 made it sound dated. But I'm glad you like it. That's good. It's nice to have variety.
again, yeah. But then I think if people listening at this point realise that the basic bitch choices are mine and the deep cuts.
Not necessarily. No. There's a lot of fucking deep cuts that we didn't go with.
Yeah.
But yeah. So the next basic bitch choice.
He's me again.
Montel Jordan featuring Wino, and This Is How We Do It.
Again, this is. I think the reason I get this is this is one that very similar to Ready to Go, just appears in a load of different adverts. I think it's currently running on a McDonald's advert
Possibly.
at the moment. Yeah, or at least whatever's being advertised when I look at my phone when I'm watching Dairy Girls on All 4 and I have to sit through 3 minutes of adverts. So I'm looking at Twitter and all I can hear is "This is how we do it." It might be Uber Eats. I'm not 100% sure. I can't remember. I just know when I was watching, kind of catching up on. I just kind of wish that the Snoop Dogg Just Eat one would come back, but yeah, but no.
I don't, because my wife sings it every time and it's really fucking annoying.
Just eat it. But yeah, but I think the main reason I think I've get this as well is that one. I think it's much more a popular song, I think, in the US than it was over here. I think we know it by osmosis from it appearing in many different TV shows and films.
I think it was a big hit here. It got to number 11 in the UK singles chart. So yeah, fairly big hit. It's number 1 in the R&B charts. But yeah, no, I definitely remember it at the time. This was 95, so it was the transition period between me going from reading smash hits to reading things like Kerrang and Q and Metal Hammer and NME and stuff like that. And I'm absolutely sure I remember Montel Jordan being in smash hits a fair bit around about that time. It's an absolute fucking banger of a track. It's built on a beefed up sample of Slick Rick's Children's Story, which is an amazing song. So that's obviously going to help.
My frame of reference for that sample is a unreleased Eminem track called Cannabitch. Which basically
that's an excellently bad title.
It's basically the whole song is a diss track towards cannabis,
right? Okay,
and basically taking the whole kind of stan thing that cannabis did. I don't know if you're aware of that.
As in the rapper Cannabis, not
the rapper
the
Cannabis.
Drug.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know how much of Eminem and cannabis beef you know of, but this is when I was knee deep right in my kind of like like obsessed with Eminem phase back in the day. Because the song Stan, I think Cannabis did a song called Stan Lives where he rapped as Stan, like surviving the end of that song and coming back
I didn't die, so no.
Yeah. So basically, Eminem did a song called Cannabitch, which I think was supposed to go onto the Eminem show, but didn't in the end.
Right.
But it's a very Eminem show era thing. But at the start, the start of it is just basically kind of lifting from Children's Story. It goes, just a long time ago, there was a young rapper about to blow, but his album came and it was not good. I think it went led a double carpet wood. So
right, excellent. Next track, then, Editors, Munich. This is the only band on the playlist which I have seen live under an underpass in Birmingham. early days of Editors, just as they were starting to make it big, they did a secret gig underneath the underpass in the front of the mailbox in Birmingham, which is we found out about it because there was a mate of mine who was in a band who used to do gigs with their earlier band, which I think was called Snowden. So yeah, loads of. I think basically there were probably about maybe 50 people there, and I think about 25 of those were our mates from Tamworth.
See, now, yeah, so this song is a song that I think if I'd gotten into a couple of bands that at the time rather than many years later, I'm thinking of the Wombats and Maximo Park, who I ended up getting into in I think it was 2012 I got into the Wombats, in 2014 I got into Maximo Park. If I'd actually listened to my mate who was into them at the time, I probably would have ended up listening to Editors. But I didn't, and this is still the only song of theirs I know, and I always forget this song exists.
Oh, it's great.
Until you hear it, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's that song, and I never remember the name of the song, and I never remember its Editors.
Well, the Back Room, their debut album, is fantastic. So, in fact, most of their albums are really good. But yeah, I've seen them quite a few times over the years at various different size gigs.
Oh, they're a Birmingham band. I didn't know that.
They are, yeah.
Okay.
I've seen them. I saw them first time I saw them was at the Birmingham Barfly, which is now the one of the rooms in the Institute. I think it's the Institute 2.
The one you have to go downstairs to.
Yes, it's the downstairs one. But then the biggest place I've seen them was Hyde Park on the main stage supporting The Cure a few years ago. So it's nice to see that they've got bigger and bigger. They're like festival headliner status in mainland Europe apparently. Somebody was telling me there was a festival that they played where Editors headline one night, Red Hot Chili Peppers headline the next one, which is ridiculous. I think that is a bit of a step up to Red Hot Chili Peppers. I think that might have been they ran out of budget, so got Editors to headline one of the days. But they are pretty successful in Europe, definitely. And great. And this is a track where they're being listened to in the present day by Kevin while he's driving his car, and it's another bit where it's like, yes, my music taste means that I would also be listening to that in the car when I was listening to the same stuff he was in the 90s.
I'm going to quickly ask you a question, not to kind of put the host hat on, but slight tangent, but not. In terms of the character of Natalie's music taste, I'm wondering how much of an influence Juliette Lewis herself had on the music taste surrounding Natalie, and also the fashion choices, because there's at one point very late in the season, this won't be a spoiler, where you see her wearing an Amel and the Sniffers shirt at one point. And I mean, again, it would not surprise me in the least that Juliette Lewis is a fan of them. So I'm wondering how much of an influence Juliette Lewis had. I
would take a guess that the Peaches and Iggy Pop track, at the very least, was influenced by her. If it wasn't her choosing it, it was the programmers going, Juliet's definitely going to like this one, we'll put this one in there for her. Because her band, Juliet and the Licks, sort of sounds a little bit like a cross between Iggy and the Stooges and Peaches.
Okay.
I do get the impression that I think a lot of the music that she likes is probably quite similar to her character. Mm-hmm. But that is mostly based on either roles that she's played or her own band. So I don't, she might be sitting listening to, Taylor Swift when she's at home, because actually I'm listening to all of this stuff and I'm listening to Taylor Swift. So I'm not giving her as much credit as I am myself there. I'm saying all this stuff about, she's grown up and this is what she listens to now. Natalie might be a big Taylor Swift fan. I don't think they would show that in there. I think if anybody's going to get, have somebody listening to Taylor Swift, it'd probably be Misty, from what we've heard.
Yeah, but I think they've gone down the show tune route, haven't they?
Well, she's got there is a mixture with Misty. Her music taste is either show tunes, like in fact exclusively Andrew Lloyd Webber show tunes, which is definitely the sign of a fucking psychopath as far as I can tell. But also the other sort of style of music that she seems to listen to is the sort of quite adult orientated Radio 2 type pop stuff, like Wilson Phillips she's listening to, which she's listening to in the really early flashback that I think is supposed to be about 1993-ish, and also listening to in her car later on. So I think with that kind of thing, some of Taylor Swift's more recent stuff like Lover and Folklore, she may well quite like, although it might be a bit too cool for her. Because Taylor Swift is cool, as everyone listening knows. Otherwise, they're not allowed to listen.
Yes, no. As a converted Swiftie, I completely agree.
Hell yeah. Next track then, Mazzy Star, Fade Into You, which is another Natalie pick. I've picked a lot of Natalie picks in this, which I've only just realised as I've been going through. But they're the ones I like the most, so that's fine. Actually, no, you picked this one, didn't you? Can't remember.
No, it was you that picked it.
Oh, was it me that picked it? Okay, cool.
The only frame reference that I'm fully aware of Mazzy Star that I can think of recently is that I think that the band keeps showing up on Sidetracks with Abby and John, which is a new podcast I'm starting to listen to. Yeah, they bring up Mazzy Star quite a bit.
Yes, I've heard that when listening because it's an excellent podcast. Mazzy Star are great. Although this song massively eclipses everything else they ever did in terms of popularity. I had a look on Spotify earlier at the number of plays, and this has got almost 200 million more plays than their next most popular song. Although weirdly, in the UK, this is only their third highest charting single. Because this got to number 48. Flowers in December in 1996 got to number 40, which is their only top 40 hit. And then Into Dust, which was on the same album as this, really weirdly got to number 47 in 2009. So I was like, why? Why did that happen? So I looked into it, and it was apparently in a Virgin Media advert.
Oh, right.
So, yeah. And it's a beautiful song. It deserves to be higher than 47. But Fade Into You, being very well known, is fucking beautiful as well. This is a song I've played guitar for various different female singers covering this song at various open mics over the years. And I hope Sandoval's vocals are amazing. I don't think Lana Del Rey, I don't think would be the singer she is without Hope Sandoval. They've got a similar sort of almost lazy sort of way of getting to the notes. They sort of like almost like bend the notes as they're singing. It's like they start singing flat and then bend the notes up to get there. But yeah, Mazzy Star, it's lovely. It's nice chilled out stuff. I like it.
Yeah, I think I in the last half an hour leading up to this, I was seeing a live rendition of it on YouTube, and it's a really, really nice song. I don't have that much knowledge of Mazzy Star as a whole or any of the other stuff. But I don't think if it's all descending, I probably won't get into that much. So no, I can't listen to a whole album of this. This is probably something that's.
To be honest, I don't often. It's they're a band I dip in and out of, like sort of various tracks.
Yeah. But it's a really nice song, and it fits in in the moment that it's in the show as well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Collective Soul was the next one. The World I Know. This is one that you chose.
Yeah. So. And the only reason that I chose this because I think it reminded me of another TV series that he appeared in. But and also I think when I was listening to the soundtrack as well, it's got that kind of very occasionally there's a kind of this is going to sound worse than it is, kind of mediocre rock that will seep through that somehow ticks some of the like serotonin levels in my brain. I'm thinking, oh, I quite like this, and I think it's the same. I think Bare Naked Ladies' Heart, some of their kind of not as good albums hit the same thing.
It's inoffensive, isn't it?
Inoffensive. Yeah. I feel bad for saying that because it reminds me of kind of the more serious but not as good Bare Naked Ladies songs. I
don't think they're trying to be like Dead Kennedys or anything like that. So, I think they're okay with being inoffensive. This is one of the tracks from the 90s on the soundtrack, one of the only ones on the soundtrack that I didn't know at all. Collective Soul, I always knew the name of, but they never charted at all in the UK, despite them being massive in America. I think they were quite big in Australia as well. I'd have really liked this at the time, I think, but I dig it now. It's got the string arrangements on it are absolutely beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
The chorus is a little bit obvious, but the verses and instrumental bits where there's that little arpeggiated guitar that comes back in are absolutely lovely.
Yeah, I think it's one from it's also one from quite a few of the penultimate episode as well, and the bit again not gonna get too much into spoiler, but it's used in a montage, so like, people getting ready for an event, so like, and there's a kind of like looming sense that something bad's going to happen, and it conveys that kind of feeling quite well, I think.
Yes.
And I think that works quite well. And those kind of guitars and that, he said the strings as well, have that kind of ethereal kind of distance which matches what we're seeing on screen at the time. And I think, and it's also, and the TV shows that I remember it being in, I can't remember when exactly it was, but there's a Canadian TV show that I absolutely love, which apparently no one else ever believes that exists, even if I attempt to Google it. There's a show called Being Erica.
No.
It's a Canadian show.
No, you're making that up. I'm going to Google it now. Yeah. I'm going to see if it exists. Being Erica.
Yes.
No, not coming up on Google at all. You've made it up.
Okay.
You're just trying to fucking confuse people.
Yeah, well, and then again, it must be a TV show that I made up with a soundtrack that I've obviously made myself through MySpace.
With a song that you wouldn't have heard until later on in Yellowjackets.
Yeah, yes. But yeah, there's an episode, I think, I can't remember when it is, but this song comes in at a certain time in that TV show as well. And I was like, oh, hang on, I remember that. That's like suddenly bringing back memories of a TV show I haven't seen for ages. I think that's one of the reasons I also picked it as well, because it reminded me of that.
Cool.
I mean, yeah.
Reminded you of something that doesn't exist.
Yes.
Although perhaps it did exist, but a therapist was sent back in time and deleted it. Because that is apparently the premise of the series, according to Google, because it does exist, really.
Yeah. Potentially, yes.
Belly, Geppetto, next song. Belly are fucking great. I love Belly.
Never heard of them before.
Right. Are you familiar with Tanya Donnelly? Have you heard of her?
No, but she is, as I've noticed with quite a few... in my Googling, I've noticed she is one of several female singers on this list who is exactly 55 years old. There's a lot of 55-year-olds. singers in this playlist.
Yes, I think Liz Fair's 55 when I saw that earlier when I was... Yeah, I think that's interesting.
Yeah, Hope Sandoval is 55. Tanya Donnelly is 55. Courtney Love's 57, but
it probably tells people she's 55.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're not familiar with Tanya Donnelly or Belly, are you familiar with a band called Throwing Muses? Apart from the track that's on this playlist by them, that we're not talking about now because neither of us have picked it. And if you're not familiar with Throwing Muses, have you heard of The Breeders? Have you not fucking heard of The Breeders? I was fucking building it up to go, oh yeah, she was in The Breeders, who are very well known. Have you heard of the Pixies, Matt?
Who?
Oh, this is brilliant.
The Pixies I have heard of.
Right, okay.
Yeah, one of their albums is the namesake of a band that I really got obsessed with in like the early noughties, a Scandinavian digital synth punk band called Surferosa. That's my knowledge of Pixies. Oh, and Where Is My Mind?
Yes. So, Pixies bass player is Kim Deal. Kim Deal and her sister Kelly Deal formed a band called The Breeders, who had a song called Cannonball, which is a massive alternative hit that you've probably heard at some point.
And I'm assuming it's a different Cannonball to the Damien Rice one.
Yes.
Because if you're going to tell me, if you were going to tell me that it was covered by Damien Rice, my head would have been exploding.
No.
And goes, what? That's a cover?
But yeah, Tanya Donnelly was previously in Throwing Muses. When she left Throwing Muses, she joined the Breeders for a bit. And then she left the Breeders and formed Belly, which is this band. And they're great.
That's
Belly,
another one I'm going to write down.
I really think that you need to listen to Star, the Belly record that this is from. It's a absolutely brilliant 90s indie rock record. Tanya Donnelly is an amazing songwriter. You've got there's a track called Dusted that's really good on there. Slow Dog, Feed the Tree, Full Moon, Empty Heart's great on there. That whole album is fantastic. And then King, the next album, was really good as well. They're just great. There's a track. Have you ever seen Mallrats?
Yes.
There's a track that it was one of their B-sides, but was also on the Mallrats soundtrack called Broken, which is my favourite song by Belly. But yeah, I wasn't listening to them yet in '96, but by '98 I was definitely listening to Belly.
I think what I'm finding as well is that I think a lot of this is perhaps if Buffy the Vampire Slayer had started 2 years before it did, I'm assuming, this seems to be a lot of the music that has a lot of crossover with some of the songs that's off that soundtrack album as well.
Some of these bands would definitely have played in the Bronze, absolutely.
Yeah, so again, as I said at the start of this episode, this is like a bunch of stuff which is kind of filling the gaps of like, Matt, you'd love half the stuff you've not listened to in this.
So the next song that this is one that you've picked is "Kiss from a Rose" by Seal.
Part of it is because I think culturally it's I've mentioned this when it was brought up on the Hits That Lie podcast that I went on when we talked about the 95, and one of the hosts, Erin, picked this song. And
didn't she pick every single pick from the Batman Forever soundtrack?
Yeah,
that was absolutely genius.
Yeah,
that's my favourite episode of Hits Don't Lie that they've done. Purely for Erin picking every single song from the same album. That really made me laugh.
So I know you little hints you may be hearing from Jacob and Erin in the future on this podcast.
Excellent.
Hint. Jacob very, very imminently, like perhaps 14 days after this airs, perhaps. So Seal, Kiss from a Rose, it's one of those songs that I think probably doesn't have that. It's one of those songs that I think has a deceptively long shelf life in that people forget it exists until they remember it, and they suddenly remember it being really, really big, and it was at the time. I mean, I think this song was massive, and it's one of those things where like people suddenly will just reference it, and then they'll remember the whole thing. I mean, again, I've been on like I went on a stag do, and like it was a 5-day stag do, and I turned up on the last day because I'm sane. And pretty much for the whole 5 days, people were just going, baby! And, yeah, just randomly, like, while drunk in the middle of Liverpool. And apparently it was, like, annoying a lot of people, and it was just like an ongoing joke. But you can shout that in the middle of the night, in the middle of, like, a crowded street. People will reply and know exactly what the next bit goes like. And
yeah. I seem to... Now, I've not looked this up. But I seem to remember it getting... I'm sure it got released and then re-released and then possibly even re-released again. It seemed to get... it seemed to just keep coming back. It's... Seal also... I remember at the time thinking it was really weird that he was the first person I'd ever known where his... I think his first, second and third album were all self-titled, which I've not seen anyone else do until American Football, who all of their albums are self-titled as well.
Yeah, because this was from Seal 2.
Yeah.
Seal 2, The Quest for Peace. No, hang on, no. That's Seal 4.
Yeah, no, isn't it? It's Seal 2, The Wrath of Khan, isn't it?
Seal 2, Electric Boogaloo. Or Seal 2, The New Batch. New Recruits. Is it New Batch?
That's Gremlins 2.
The Next Assignment.
Yeah, that's Police Academy.
2, yeah. Yeah, yeah. my love for Police Academy films, notwithstanding, but apparently it was also on the Never Ending Story 3 soundtrack as well. And
now I've got the Never Ending Story music stuck in my head because I watched the last episode of Series 3 of Stranger Things last night.
Oh yeah, I fast forwarded through that. I couldn't stand it. But yeah, but again as well, where this, I'm trying to sidestep spoilers as well. Where this lands in the show is quite pivotal and is a moment that's referenced quite a lot.
I think we can say something that isn't too much of a spoiler because we've already established that they are lost in the woods for 19 months.
Yeah.
So at some point they run out of batteries for their stereo, which actually is about 10 seconds into Montel Jordan's This Is How We Do It.
Yes.
Which I meant to say earlier, because that's the last diegetic sound of the actual recording that you get in the flashback sequences. But yeah, this one is sung by the cast.
Yeah. Because
they decide they need some music. And it's great.
Yeah. And again, where it is in the show, it's kind of like it's the last few moments before shit hits the fan. But yeah, particularly with like at that point in the penultimate episode of the season, where basically a load of stuff happens. A lot of stuff happens in the TV show. Who'd have thought it?
Yes. I just to encourage people that haven't watched it to fucking watch it. Kurt, who you've heard talking about U2 albums before on Pick a Disc, Kurt says that he thinks the greatest episode of TV he has ever seen. I think he said that. It's pretty close to that.
One of that.
Yeah, or at least one of. And I'm inclined to agree with him because I watched it again yesterday. And yeah, the penultimate episode. Watch the rest of them first. Don't just skip to that one. But the penultimate it's like Game of Thrones where they put the really fucking exciting episode one episode before the last one.
Yeah, and then they can deal with the emotional fallout.
Exactly.
Yeah. Rather than having like a to be continued and having to wait a year for the next bit.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yes, Walking Dead.
But yeah, so this is like the last song in that list that's from that episode. But
yeah,
I'm very surprised. Well, not surprised, but a lot of people that talk about the music and the show in like post-season interviews and analysis bring up this song and its use in the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the use in the show as well, and the way it works is just really, really well done.
There's one we didn't have on the list to talk about that is on the playlist that I just wanted to briefly mention. Dot Allison featuring Amy Bowman, The Haunted, which is in the final episode. And Dot Allison, the album that is from, is so good. There was a track from it on, there's a track called Long Exposure, which was on our Weirdig Music Best of 2021 episode. Got quite high up in the countdown. So that is an album that is worth checking out. But the next one we are actually talking about is Lady Killers by Lush, which, could you hear that in the episode? I know where it was, but I was straining my ears and I couldn't fucking hear it at all. It was allegedly playing at the school reunion just before they go in 2021.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, I couldn't remember. I couldn't really remember it much either. But but I think the reason I picked it was that one, I never really listened to it before, and two, I kind of really liked it, and I'm like really liked it. And I've already created a playlist of the stuff that's on Spotify that I haven't yet listened to.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's just something about this which kind of, again, it's another one of these things where I'm listening to. I'm like, this is basically a lot of stuff that I'm listening to now.
Yes.
And I just need to listen to more and just delve into Lush a bit more.
Yeah, well, this album was quite a big departure for them. This was their, I think, final album. I don't think they've done any others since then. I've got a feeling no, I don't think they did reform. I think...
Love Life was that. Yeah, it was their last one.
Yeah. Mickey, their singer and guitarist, has a new band called Paroshka, I think. But yeah, this was basically they decided to go a lot more pop and basically made a Britpop album at the height of Britpop.
Tangent, Mickey Berenice, who's the lead singer.
Yes.
Who's the lead singer of Lush. 55 years old.
Right. Okay. There's it's like numerology.
Maybe the number 55 is key in the mysteries that is Yellowjackets.
I think we need to look out for that.
Yeah, can you hear that, Tony? That'll get you. Get you buzzing.
Buzz, indeed, for Yellowjackets. Before this record, they were basically a sort of shoegaze type band. They were signed to 4AD Records, and a lot of the bands on 4AD, like Red House Painters, were sort of like slowcore, where there were lots of massive chorused guitars, but slow, quite sad songs. And there's a lot of people who are a few years older than me that absolutely love them. And I really need to do a proper deep dive investigation on their stuff from before this album, because I know the singles from this album really well, because they were all big hits. There was like 500, Shake Baby Shake, and Single Girl were all really big hits as well. And then Mark Radcliffe and Mark and Lard's band, the Shire Horses, did a spoof version called Single Bloke.
Oh, that rings a bell. Why does that ring a bell?
Possibly because you've heard the Shire Horses version of it at some point.
I wonder if they played it during the Mark and Lard and Radio 1, or they must...
Oh yeah, they used to play their Shire Horses tracks quite often on that. Mark Riley, Lard, was a member of The Fall. Just to bring us back round to talking about The Fall again. Next track, the last one that I've chosen for the playlist, Come Out and Play by The Offspring. So, what do you think of when you think about The Offspring?
Now, my first memories of The Offspring, and again, this is going to be kind of very similar to when I was talking to my friend Dan
Yeah.
about Blink-182 in that a couple of years difference means that people would just ignore Green Day's Dookie and immediately would have gone to Enema of the State.
Yes.
Yeah. The Offspring are very similar in that, but in that case, it's with themselves. So you've got a kind of very weird version of the Offspring, which is their early stuff, which I've kind of tried to get into, but there's only a couple of songs I can. But then you've got stuff like That's Pretty Fly for a White Guy, Original Prankster, which Pretty Fly for a White Guy was my first ever kind of song I ever recall from the Offspring. Yeah. So it's that point, and then they would go into some really, really shite, like Junk in My Trunk.
Some odd good songs in there, like Kids Aren't Alright. But yeah, the Offspring were a band who were, if you were into pop punk in the mid-90s, like I absolutely fucking was. You know how there's the big four of thrash metal, which is Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, and Slayer. If there was a big four of 90s pop punk, it would be Green Day, Offspring, Rancid, and NoFX. Basically, until Blink-182 came along and sort of became the big one.
I'd put Blink-182 as pop punk rock. At that time, like NoFX, Rancid, the Offspring are definitely more kind of
they're less
punk.
pop.
Yeah, they're less pop. They're much more kind of what I would class nearer the sound of Bad Religion. Bad Religion.
Less
I remember
boring.
Speaking to... Yeah, because I remember when I was speaking to Carl, I think I was quite surprised that that Bad Religion was technically pop punk, but a very different style of pop punk. And I think on that spectrum, I think Green Day would eventually evolve to almost go towards a lot more of the Blink-182 sound of pop punk. But yeah.
But yeah, the Smash, the Offspring album that this is taken from, came out in 1994. And when I was first... So yeah, like 27 years ago, 1995, I bought my first issue of Kerrang, and I bought it because it had got Green Day and Offspring on the cover. And it was... They were sort of... There was a bit of... I don't think they ever had too much of rivalry between them. But I think with the fans, there was a little bit of like Blur and Oasis type. You're not allowed to like both, but I fucking did. I loved both of them. Dookie and Smash were the two most important records until I found Smashing Pumpkins. But then later on, Offspring descended into novelty records with Pretty Fly for a White Guy and Why Don't You Get a Job and an Original Prankster. And in the UK sold a lot more records. Worldwide, however, Smash is still the biggest selling independent record of all time. Because it was released on Epitaph Records. So whereas Green Day were on Warner Brothers, by that point they'd signed to a major label which got them banned from their sort of home club, which is Gilman Street in the Bay Area. Gilman Street had got a rule where if you signed to a major label, you weren't allowed to play the club anymore, which is really shit. But I can sort of see where they were coming from, but Green Day's earlier records weren't in the shops. The kids couldn't buy them, so they signed to a major label that could get them proper distribution, and it was the right thing to do. But yeah, Offspring stayed with Epitaph, who had somehow got a really good distribution deal anyway. And yeah, became absolutely massive. But yeah, Smash I rebought recently because I got it on vinyl. And it still holds up. It's a fucking great record. I absolutely love it. I can remember I first got into it on a school German exchange. So I was a massive Green Day fan. Went over to Germany in 1995, and the kid that I was staying with had got smashed by the Offspring. and while I was there, bought a copy of it from a record shop in Dormagen in Germany. The same week, I bought from the same shop Insomniac by Green Day a week before it was released in the UK. It was a few days before it was released in Germany, and they just let me buy it because I went in and I was an English kid in a Green Day t-shirt. And they're like, "Oh, we can sell him something. Excellent. Do you want to buy that?" Yes, I do, even though it's not out yet. Absolutely. But yeah, Green Day and Offspring were absolutely my thing at this point. And I still enjoy listening to them now. But not the latest stuff for either of them.
The later stuff I'm not much fan of, but
No.
the sweet spot, I think the sweet spot of like the Blink-182 fan within me kind of like really quite liked that kind of aspect. I did have a friend at school who was kind of really into the earlier stuff, and I think I did borrow Smash and Ixnay and the Hombre. Is it Ixnay?
They're the two that I love. Ixnay not so much. There's the self-titled record and Ignition before that. Ignition's got some good stuff on there. There's a track called Dirty Magic that's really good. Flawless Music Podcast did an episode on Ignition a while ago. That's worth a listen as well. So yeah.
I know Americana and Conspiracy 1. I think no, I'm pretty sure it gave me Ignition and Smash and Ixnay and Americana.
Yeah,
I think, but I don't remember Conspiracy of 1. Which one was that? What was on that one? Conspiracy of 1. I remember.
I think that's got Original Prankster on it.
Yes, it's got Want You Bad, and I do.
Yeah.
Want You Bad and Million Miles Away. Yeah.
Want You Bad's a good track. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that as well. And I think Americana's the one with When You Get a Job and Pretty Fly.
Yes. Americana was their album that they released in 98, I think, that was the album when I was at sixth form that it was the only album that everyone could agree on liking to get put on the stereo. The rest of the time it was like Shauna's car. You'd put something on and somebody would come and fucking turn it off and put, something terrible on.
Oh yeah, the sixth form common room was like that. People flipping between One Extra and BBC Radio 1 all the time.
We never seemed to have the radio on. It was always CDs. But yeah.
No, it was always the radio because someone broke the CD lens reader.
Not that I was there much,
yeah.
Because that was the point where we discovered the internet and Grand Theft Auto. And I dropped out of sixth form to play Grand Theft Auto and then went to college instead. So, we've got two more songs. So the penultimate one, you've chosen.
Yeah, Enya's Only Time. And Enya's Only Time. And this is probably the bit where I'm going to edit out some potential spoilers. I'm not going to get too spoilery, but just in case.
Yeah.
If you're listening on Pick a Disc, I will edit out. I'll cut out chunks. But there are probably some bits I'll probably leave in just in case, unless we suddenly start talking about the next one. But yeah, there's no way to talk about this without getting too spoilery.
Yeah.
But that's probably the reason I haven't chose Vienna by Ultravox, because there's no way we can not talk about. We can't spoil that bit. But
yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, just so
it means nothing to me anyway. That one.
Yeah. Oh, bloody hell.
You've got to leave that in now.
But yeah, so if Sunday feels choppy, I'm editing out spoilers for the Pick a Disc people. So
should we let the Pick a Disc people back in and talk about the theme tune?
Oh, go on then, yeah. Right. and all those like really weird Pick a Disc listeners. Yeah.
Oh, they're here now. Shh.
Yes.
So yeah, last song that we're going to talk about is the theme tune, which is by Craig Wedren and Anna Waronker, which I think if she was British, she'd have probably changed that name, because there's two letters that would get rubbed off all of the time. whenever you wrote your name anywhere when you were at school, at least. But she has got quite a musical pedigree with that name.
Yeah.
She's the sister of Joey Waronker, who's a session drummer who's played with Beck, REM, Atoms for Peace, Nelly Furtado, David Byrne, Brandon Flowers. I couldn't find out if he was the drummer on this. I think it's likely that he probably is. But I can't find any information anywhere on who the actual musicians playing on the score are. But also, she's the daughter of Lenny Waronker, who was a massively important music businessman. He was at one time he was the president of Warner Brothers. He's also been the president of DreamWorks, and so in the 90s he signed Eels, he signed Elliott Smith, he signed Rufus Wainwright, he also signed Jenny Lewis for a short period. I think she only did one album with. No, she's done a few with Warner Brothers. So yeah, that's Warner Brothers, not DreamWorks, that she was signed to. Yeah, and Craig Wedren is in a band called Shudder to Think, who were a sort of. They're a bit of a deep cut, but if it's not too on the nose with the fact that he's done the soundtrack, it wouldn't surprise me if some Shudder to Think songs turn up being listened to by Shauna, maybe, or Natalie at some point. They're that kind of sort of alternative grungy rock. Craig Wedren from my other podcast, We Dig Music, my co-host Tracy seems to think that every single vocalist in the world sounds like Craig Wedren. He gets mentioned a lot.
Yeah, so again, the name, I wasn't familiar with the name at all until I started perhaps looking into it, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, what hasn't this guy done? It's just like a load of stuff that he's done music for, and like, so he's composed loads of different films, and performed music for shows like United States of Tara, Reno 911, Don't Trust a Bitch in Apartment 23 as well, Dawson's Creek, Bones.
Yeah.
I'm just surprised at how much that I didn't know.
Well, Shudder to Think broke up in the late 90s, I think, and around that sort of time, Shudder to Think had done a couple of songs on the Velvet Goldmine soundtrack, which they did. There's a track called Hot Ones on there, which is brilliant. It's a 90s band, but totally sounding like it's a lost 70s glam track. And they do an amazing job on that. And I think from that, he got a taste for wanting to do soundtracks and sort of moved into it from there. And I'm glad he did, because the incidental music in this, when it's not a song what we already know, like we've been talking about, the original music that he's written for it is, well, he and Anna Waronker have written for it. Absolutely fantastic. This track's great.
Yeah, I keep meaning to try and coerce Tony to do a kind of crossover with between the notes on the actual score of this, because on
Blood Hive, the soundtrack album.
Yeah, because I haven't listened to it that much because I'm not really a soundtrack person. But
no,
in terms of this, though, I mean, you can't not hear this music. And I thought it was an actual song at first, but then it is an original composition, and it
is an actual song, but it's not one that existed previously.
Yes.
I did start to try and work out what the time signature of this song was, and then thought, I can't be asked. It's insane, whatever the time signature is on this. I think it changes every other bar.
Yeah, but I think it's got that kind of 90s kind of like drive. Like, there's parts of it that reminds me very, very much like the Buffy theme tune in places, where there's the bit where it kind of kicks in, but then you've got those kind of very weird. Is it supernatural? Is it just voices in like your broken psyche coming in when those like really kind of haunting vocals come in, where you're same as you, and then basically ends well, the the minute and a bit title sequence bit where it just basically feels like it's turned into a Wolf Alice song, and I love Wolf Alice, so this reminded me of Wolf Alice, and I'm like, this theme tune's brilliant.
Yeah, I can dig that. Mm-hmm. It's good. I like it. It's got some good songs on this playlist. I think that pretty much wraps it up there, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. If you just give me the keys back to the podcast, and I'll resume hosting.
Go on then.
Yeah. Okay. So,
although I would like to point out that I have looked on the spreadsheet, so I know what the next episode is, and it's a fucking great album. So make sure you're listening next fortnight as well.
Yeah. And did you think that's what that?
No, but I'm glad he has chosen it.
Yeah,
it's a band I absolutely love.
And again, a band that I never really listened to apart from a few singles and like this singles, but
first two albums are amazing.
I'm gonna have to cut this bit out because I'm starting to reveal stuff that I reveal in the latest one, but but yes, okay. So we can't really do the usual live stuff. We can't do the reception stuff because we've just talked briefly about because of all the other things and stuff. Or other albums in Subject Discography, we've talked about. You've briefly kind of guided me in a direction, and I'm running out of space to write down the bands I need to listen to properly. But the thing that always stays the same in every episode of this podcast is the Spotify Hall of Fame playlist, where I will ask the guest, in this case Colin, to pick one song from the disc that has been picked to be immortalised forever.
I should have looked at what was the longest one, shouldn't I, to go with my my previous picks. I'm going to break tradition and not necessarily go for the longest one. It might be. I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to go for... You know what? I am not going to go for my favourite song on here. I'm going to go for one that's not going to get the chance another time. So I think we should put Craig Wedren and Anna Waronker's No Return on there.
The open bracket extended version, close bracket.
Yes, yeah. Because I was going to go with Come Out and Play by The Offspring because it's my favourite one. But, you know, although if I do Smash at some point, it won't be that track that I pick from it. But
that's going to go in the queue of other albums you've already asked.
I think to be most representative of it, I think we should definitely go for the theme tune. Yeah.
No, you've got no. What's the word I'm thinking of?
Legs? No, I have.
No disagreement here.
Cool.
No, yep. So I'm not opposed to that at all. Yep. No Return, open brackets, extended version, close brackets by Craig Wedren and Annan.
Craig Wedren.
By fuck's sake, we've been talking for 2 hours 5 minutes. This is easily the longest episode of the podcast so far.
Amazing.
So, No Return, open bracket, extended version, close bracket by Craig Redren and Anna. Fuck's sake.
Waronker.
By Craig Redren and Anna. By Craig and Anna.
Waronker.
Waronker.
Anna Waronker's Chocolate Factory.
Okay. No Return. Fuck's sake.
Fun.
Oh, man. This might be the first blooper reel that
How? No, normally you just leave them in, don't you? Yeah, fair point.
Yeah. No, I do cut quite a bit out, actually. No Return, open bracket, extended version, close bracket, by Craig Redren and Anna Waronker.
Oh, it's the fact that you keep pausing and then completely failing to say it. It's brilliant. Do you want me to say it?
Please.
No Return, extended version by Craig Wedren and Anna Waronker.
That's the song that goes onto the playlist.
Because I can say it's fucking unusual when it's me that's pronouncing things correctly.
Yeah, that's how bad this is.
Ian and Tracy will be very confused.
So we've now reached the end of our conversation. So
have.
as always, seems like the map picks are the really longest ones, or it's either map picks or episodes with viewing. Because I think the War of the Worlds was quite long as well. But
Well, it's a double album.
yeah, and this is like a massive playlist of
Yeah.
So
Not as long as the Metallica Blacklist one, though, is it?
no, actually, yeah, that was about 5 hours, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But Colin, so if people want to find you and your podcast, where can they find you?
So I've got 3 podcasts, but you probably already know about the Shipwrecked and Comatose Red Dwarf one. So I'll talk about the others because musicy things. So We Dig Music is me and my friends Ian and Tracy. At the moment, we are midway through our 10-year mission to find our favourite songs of, basically find the greatest song ever. But what we're doing is we pick a year each episode, and then pick 10 songs each, and then vote on them in secret, and then argue about the results. Occasionally we do other episodes where it's just talking about an album that we've picked, which I believe the next episode that comes out about the time of this episode is a now playing episode, which is a bit more like a pick a disc normal episode, really. But there's 3 albums on it because we pick one each. But then my other podcast is Free With This Month's Issue, which is me plus my friend Ian from We Dig Music and various different guests each month. Mr. Matthew Latham, you have joined us on one of those episodes before.
I have.
We should probably do another one at some point. Mm-hmm. And basically, we listen to an old free CD or tape from Kerrang, Metal Hammer, Enemy, Q, that kind of thing. Old music magazines, and discover the various horrors and delights within. Both podcasts are on the We Made This network, such as this podcast is. And you can find them both on wedigpodcast.com, but also you can find them by searching for them because it's a podcast and you're listening to a podcast, so you know how to find them. So Free With This Month's Issue or We Dig Music. Rather, Free With This Month's Issue and We Dig Music. Subscribe to both of them, listen to them, tell all your friends. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't recommend those enough. I pretty much.
I can't recommend those.
No, I can't recommend them. I was just about to say that I do regard as We Dig Music and Free With This Month's Issue as like pretty much the sibling podcasts.
Definitely.
To this one. So so it's very like some of like one of the closest friendships to another podcast on the
man.
In terms of music one. So yeah, I can't recommend them enough.
Thank you.
Now this is the part. Now on a pick of this episode, I'll usually just kind of get the guest to just say like thanks, this has been great or something, and then kind of do the thing where I kind of mix the drums of the theme tune as they're saying it, which is probably why I could never kind of outsource my editing, because it'll really annoy me because they won't do that. But then with no book club, there's usually the kind of spiel that Tony gets us to say about.
Yeah.
If you the Yellowjackets is not all that we're discussing, but as this is mainly a pick a disc episode, I'm going to sod that. I'm going to be punk. I'm going to be punk and just say sod that. Hi Tony, if you're listening.
I was going to say it is a no book club one, so Tony probably will be listening. Hi Tony. I am bad influence.
yes. The punk ethos is rubbing off on me. But yeah, you know the spiel by now. Yellowjackets isn't all that we're discussing. We discuss about music. We're discussing about books or whatever on the We Made This network. So if you're listening to Now Book Club, this is the part that has this. If you're listening to Pick a Disc and you're wondering what the hell he's blithering on about, just ignore this bit. Listen to other stuff on the We Made This podcast network.
Boom.
You've been listening to Pick a Disc, and I've been your host, Matthew Latham. Our theme music is Pump by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Pick a Disc is hosted by the We Made This podcast network, and you can find them on www.spreaker.com/user/WeMadeThis. You can find the Pick a Disc show site on www.spreaker.com/show/pickadisc. You can find us on all the usual social media type places like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter under Pick a Disc. You can also email us on pickadisc@gmail.com. Until next time, happy listening to all those discs that you are picking. Goodbye.
Elsewhere on We Made This. Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast.
This was one you requested, Matt. Was there any particular reason?
Part of it is because it meant that I got to get onto Out of Time.
Oh, okay, so that was the reason. Right.
Yeah, no, ask me that question again when we do episode 2 of season 10.
I think I know what you're talking about on that particular episode that you might want to be on.
Oh, it's episode 1, yeah.
Yes.
But also, I think I'm quite a big Rimmer fan, and I always find Rimmer-centric episodes interesting, dependent on their quality. And this and the next episode, and I don't really want to go into something that is more relevant for next episode.
Free with this month's issue.
Talking about double bass, did you ever play double bass?
No, I have touched a double bass, but I've never actually played it. I'll stick with a 5-string Warwick, and that'll be all right.
The only time I've ever played one was the short period I was at university. They've got one in the music room there, and I used to play it on its side like a normal bass. Although I'm nowhere near as big as Pete Steele from Typo Negative, so it was even more ridiculous when I did it than when he does it.
Movieversaries podcast.
Yeah, I like, A New Hope. I like Strikes Back. I like The Last Jedi. I think Revenge of the Sith is pretty good. But, Rise of Skywalker can just...
Rise of Skywalker is terrible.
Yeah,
it's terrible.
You know what I mean?
On our podcast, we're big fans of The Last Jedi, and we do not like Rise of Skywalker at all.
Oh, maybe I'll fit right in then.
Maybe you'll fit right in.
But yeah, I can offer maybe a controversial take. Like, for example, I think The Return of the Jedi is not good.
Get out. Get out.
Hey, man, this is my podcast. You get out.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.